Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar. And today's webinar is on unlocking the power of Nx Monorepos, best practices and migration insights. We are excited to have you here as we will dive into the world of Nx and how it can transform the way you manage and scale your Angular projects. In this session, we'll explore key benefits of using Nx Monorepo, cover some best practices, some practical use cases, strategies to improve project structure and development efficiency. We'll also take you through our own journey of migrating multiple Angular CLI libraries into Nx Monorepo and share the challenges we faced, the lessons we learned, and also the advantages we have seen as a result of this. Whether you're new to Nx or you're just looking to optimize your current setup, we hope that this webinar will provide valuable insight to help you on your journey. So let's get started. First, I would like to introduce Boris. Boris will be our main speaker for today.
Okay, thank you, Slavice. Welcome, everyone. My name is Boris, and I'll be walking you through Nx Monorepo in general and the exciting journey of why and how we transitioned from managing multiple Angular libraries in a single workspace to leverage the full power of Nx Monorepo. This webinar is designed for developers, tech leads, software architects, programmers who manage and work on large-scale projects, and they want to improve the scalability, maintainability, and efficiency. But first, let's introduce ourselves. As I said, my name is Boris, and I'm working as a front-end developer and a team lead in AVS Solutions. I'm working as a developer for 9 years. I started first as a full-stack developer, but later I specialized myself as a front-end developer and also the front-end architect. Mainly, I'm working with Angular, but I also have experience with React, Quick, Next, etc. Now, I will let my colleague Vladimir to introduce himself.
Thank you, Boris. My name is Vladimir Nešić, and I'm working as a software architect in AVS Solutions. I'm almost 20 years in industry. Started as a developer, then moved to the full stack development, and I'm using Angular almost from the 2016 from the version 1. And I'm also working on solutions that are related to the cloud and extensively using Angular on the front end. Thank you, Boris, for introduction, and I will try to help you with the Q&A section.
Thank you, Vladimir. Okay, let's first see what you can expect from this session. We will learn what are the Nx Monorepo and why they are a game changer. We will understand how to structure an Nx workspace for maximum efficiency. We will explore the benefits of replacing our previous multi-library approach. We will dive into the key Nx commands and CI/CD workflow, and we will discover the best practices and the lessons that we learned from my migration journey. By the end of this session, you will understand how Nx helps to optimize your workspace structure, to enforce the best practices, and create a more productive development workflow. Let's understand what are the Nx Monorepos and how we can use them. Nx is an open source development tool designed for Monorepo, enabling efficient management of multiple applications and libraries in one workspace. It serves as a build system and development toolkit for modern web applications, specifically designed for scalable enterprise architectures. It allows you to manage the multiple applications and libraries in a single repository with ease. Unlike traditional multi-repo setups, Nx provides the unified workspace, easier code sharing, all projects, apps, and libraries live together, smart tooling such as dependency graphs, task orchestration, and intelligent caching to boost the performance, shared best practices, single store for code styles, formatting, and linting across solutions, pre-configured setup for Angular, React, or some other framework. Let's see what are the key features of Nx. As I mentioned, dependency graph visualization helps to identify a relationship between apps and libraries. Consistently tooling such as linting, formatting, and testing are configured globally for all projects. Smart caching speeds up repetitive tasks by reusing results. The modular architecture, libraries are modular, reusable, and follow clear boundaries. Now let's see what are the ideal projects for Nx Monorepo. So large-scale Angular projects which share libraries, such as for example shared design system, authentication, or common components, the project is expected to evolve and grow over time. Organizations managing multiple apps and microservices, and teams that are looking to enforce consistent coding standards. Now let's also see when maybe the Nx is not the best choice. For small projects with minimal dependencies, for completely independent applications, when teams have strict isolation requirements, for example, different versions, etc., and for the projects with short lifespan. So to clarify this, if you plan to scale with multiple libraries or application in the future, the project is expected to evolve and grow over time. Teams collaborate and benefit from code sharing, and your application share logic libraries or dependencies, then the Nx is a great choice. But if your project consists of a single small Angular application with no need for modular libraries, if the apps are built for different domains, different tech stacks, or teams with no shared code, and teamwork in silos that require full autonomy over repositories, CI/CD, and dependencies, then it's better maybe to skip it. Okay, let's see why we replaced the multi-library workspace with an Nx. I will start with what we had before. Previously, we managed the multiple Angular CLI libraries as separate projects, each with its own build and dependencies. This approach caused configuration duplication. Each project had its own setup for the build, linting, and testing. Dependency issues. Keeping shared libraries in a sync was cumbersome. We were less aware which library is using what from other libraries. An inefficient build. Rebuilding unchanged project wasted resources. And let's see how Nx solved these issues. With shared configuration, centralized ESLint, prettier, and TypeScript settings that ensure consistency, dependency boundaries with the Nx enforced module boundaries rule prevents improper imports and maintains modularity. Efficient builds, Nx builds only the affected project, using its powerful caching mechanism to speed up the tasks. Enhanced code quality with 10x, strict TypeScript rules and code quality tools are applied consistently across the Monorepo. Okay, let's talk about the benefits of migrating multiple Angular CLI libraries to Nx Monorepo. So as I said, first, enforcing module boundaries. Nx provide enforceable boundaries between the libraries using tags and dependencies constraints in ESLint JSON. This prevents accidental cross-dependencies, ensuring that the specific code remains isolated and modular. For example, you can restrict UI components from directly depending on the business logic. Effective versioning and tagging. Unlike managing multiple repositories with independent version, Nx Monorepo enable consistent versioning across all libraries. Dependency management. No need for multiple node modules. Dependencies are shared across all libraries, and that is reducing duplication. Consistent dependency update. By updating the dependencies, for example, Angular or RxJS, is performed in a centralized manner, and that is avoiding the mismatch version. A shared package JSON avoids conflicts between different versions of Angular packages. Optimize build performance, incremental builds and caching. Nx detects what has been changed and only rebuild the necessary parts. It supports distributed computation, leveraging multiple machines to parallelize the builds and test. By running the command nx affected build in parallel, it speeds up the CI/CD pipeline significantly. The flexible architecture, the Monorepo structure, allows teams to develop modular, reusable libraries, making it easy to share functionality across applications. It encourages the feature-based architecture where each library serves a distinct purpose. Implicit libraries. Nx allows implicit dependencies, meaning that apps can reference libraries without explicit path mappings in TSD config-based JSON. This keeps code clean and reduces manual configuration while still enforcing the project boundaries. Now let's see the main Nx commands and the usage with CI/CD implementation. When you migrate from CLI to NX, the ng has been replaced with NX, and essential NX commands now are build, lint, and test libraries. So you are running them with NX build, NX lint, and NX test. You can view the dependency graph with NX graph. You can see the affected projects and caching by running the NX affected test or NX affected build, but you can also clean the cache with NX reset from time to time. Advanced commands, but this is optional. That means that if it is applicable for your project, for example, you can run all your builds in parallel by running the command nx run many, all builds in parallel. But again, this is specific for the projects, and I will show you that on our example, on our CI/CD release file. Here is our ng-libs release YAML file, which we are using for our project. For example, we are having the libraries such as ng-common-utils, ng-common-share, ng-common-logging, and ng-common-authentication. In the ng-common-authentication, we are using these first three libraries that I just mentioned. For example, we want to be aware when user try to enter several times a wrong password or something like that, and we want to log that. So this library is actually a dependency in ng-common authentication. So for us, the order is really specific, and we cannot use this in the parallel manner. So first, it needs to be built ng-common utils, ng-common share, ng-common logging, and then ng-common authentication. So you can see here the parameters where we are specifying the working folder, the project name, the custom build command, the custom pack command, and we are also having the template that is actually a separate repository where we are having the package and publish YAML template file. After that, we are building the libraries such as XpressShare Common, XpressShare ng Bootstrap, the maplib, mything shared. This maybe won't be useful for you if all your apps and applications are in the single repository. But if your repositories and apps live across another repositories, then this can be maybe useful for you. Also, we're having the release bump, which is also serves for our purpose, or for the purpose if you are having the distributed repositories. It is actually a PowerShell script that is served, for example, when we do the commit and push for the new features that we are developing. It will publish the new version of a library, which we can then actually just install in a package.json that is provided by a hashtag after this script, and you can easily install that in your project. By doing that, you can actually try, for example, the authentication library with the new added feature in all your projects before this package gets released. By doing that, you will improve your development process significantly, and it will speed up the development. So, but again, yeah, if all your apps are in the single folder, then maybe this is not something that's very useful for you. Okay, now let's get back to the migration. By running these commands, npx nx latest init for standalone application and npx nx latest init with integrated for the workspace, you will migrate the multiple Angular CLI workspace into a single Nx Monorepo. But of course, this is not something that is come out of the box. First, you need to come with some decisions. First, you need to think, can we first align all our apps to the same Angular version? Can we convert each of the app libs into an easy-to-use shape with project.json? You might also need to copy everything into a new workspace or repository. You should also clarify with your team. Should you migrate all the apps into a monorepo or to keep them at different repositories as we do? Keep them at different Angular and external dependency version until everything is migrated. Migrate them one by one incrementally and in a different time. So when you run this command, it will install the nx Angular and also the nx workspace package. It will move your application into the apps folder. It will move your libraries into the libs folder, and it will update the relevant file path in your configuration files. It will update your package.json script to use the nx instead of the ng. It will split up your Angular JSON into the several project JSON files for each project with updated paths. You will need to add a workspace in your package.json or paths won't be recognized by your linter. And also you will need to add a depends on rule in each project JSON so NX understand which libraries depend from each other. Now, when we've done the migration, let's see the overview of NX Monorepo structure. So the typical NX workspace consists from apps that contains your main Angular application, such as web or mobile app, libs, reusable Angular libraries for shared features like UI components, utilities, or services, configuration file, such as NX.json that define the workspace-wide configuration. The project JSON file contains per project build, test, and lint configurations. ESLint.json is a configuration file for a tool named ESLint for identifying and reporting on patterns found in ECMAScript JavaScript code, with the goal of making code more consistent and avoiding bugs. tscconfig-based.json, centralized TypeScript configuration, and the public API and index.ts to define the clear entry points for libraries. We will see this architecture better in our demo that I will just show now. And in this demo is project to reflect the NX trains while emphasizing the modular libraries, enforcing boundaries and reusability. I'll include also some commands, components, services, and cross-library imports aligned with NX best practices. Okay, first let's see the architecture. This is a basic architecture for the Angular Monorepo, where we have the apps folder, which is now consisted from one application, and that is called Angular Monorepo. We are also having the libs folder, which is consisted from 4 libraries such as authentication, common, share UI, and the utils. These libraries in this application gets built in the dist folder, and when they gets compiled and built in this folder, they're able to be used for development. After that, we are having the files such as tscconfig-based.json, which is important for us, where we are specifying actually the paths for our compiler. By doing that, we are telling our compiler so that, for example, libs authentication and all the things that we export through public API TS file will be provided in a dist libs authentication folder. Also, we are having the package.json file, which we updated that I mentioned earlier. It is important for you manually to add a workspace. When you add a workspace manually, you're telling your code editor, in my case, Visual Studio Code Editor, from where you're using your code. For example, when you import, it might get you an error if you don't provide this workspace, because by doing this, you're actually telling that all root workspace, all root imports are provided from the dist folder. This is pretty much comes out of the box, but again, you may need to check your project root paths. And here in the NX.json file, it is also set it up. For example, the build application, how we are linting the application, and so on. It is also the important this rule that I mentioned earlier, depends on. It means that your libraries and your application actually depends on the builds, because our libraries and the application are related. And you can also specify here whether you want to cache the build or no. Okay, let's go further. ESLint config CGS file is also interesting, because you can specify over there all your rules that are important for your linter. But I won't go too deep into the linting rules. This is out of the topic. But I want to point out the enforce module boundaries that NX provides. By doing that, you can actually restrict the libraries to be imported into the other libraries. As I said, you can restrict, for example, the UI libraries to be included into the business logic. For example, this authentication library can depend on the libs utils, common, and share UI libraries. But for example, the share common can only depend on the scope utils. And our library, our application, if don't have the specified tag, can import any other library, what they want. So when you specify here the source tag, it is important to go into the library, into the project JSON, and there you should also need to specify the tag. By specifying the tag, you're actually naming this library And by naming, you then need to specify where this library can also be built or included. After that, we need to specify some of the builds, but this is pretty much coming out of the box when you run the migration. So you're specifying the build, the test, and the lint commands in the project JSON. And also the important part for this is each library has ESLint config CGS file, which is important to inherit the base config or the root ESLint config CGS file. By doing this, you're actually achieving the consistency in all your projects to have the apply same rules for the ESLints. Similar story is with PSC config JSON. It's really important to provide the extends rule, and that by doing that, you're actually applying all the rules from the root DSC config base JSON. Okay, let's now focus on our application. As I mentioned, our application is consisted in the Angular Monorepo, and it has only one component. But this component is actually importing all other libraries. So you can see here that we are having the login functionality. And in login functionality, we are actually using the out service for authentication library to log in the user and to check if user is authenticated. If user is not authenticated, we are using the error handler service from the common library. And with that, we are notifying the user with dialog. And dialog again is a component, a model component that is imported from the UI library. The logout is pretty much similar. The calculate age is actually a function that calculates the user age, and it's checking if user is adult. But we are importing that utils that is do the calculation from the UI utils library. And you can actually see here that we are using all 4 libraries in our single application. And we can do this if we have even several applications. We can reuse these libraries, and by doing that, we are achieving the good modularity and good architecture for our code. Now let's see this in demo. So application is pretty much simple, but I will show you now how it works. For example, if I try to accidentally enter the wrong password, I will get an error message that is provided from the error handler. It's from the common library. Now, when I enter the correct password, the authentication library will let me into my project. And now I can here, for example, try to enter my year of birth. If I enter something that is not correct, for example, it will tell me that I'm invalid year of birth. Please provide a valid year. This is also provided from the libraries. If I enter something that is, for example, good enough, it will calculate my age that I'm age of 12 and I need to go to school. But if I enter my year of birth, it will tell me that I'm adult and that I'm my age of 35 and I can drive a car if I want. Okay, let's see this also on the project graph. Here you can see the visual graph, how our libraries are actually imported. So our Angular Monorepo application imports all 4 libraries. It is importing Share UI, Utils, Authentication, and Common library. But for example, our authentication library is the only one that is actually using other libraries, in this case common, or the error handler service that we had a chance to see earlier. And if you see something that looks suspicious for you, that maybe you don't want that import, you can actually check where that library is imported. By clicking on this arrow, you are able to see where this library is imported, and it is telling me that the out service ts file is using the common library or the error handler service from this library. And by doing so, you can easily understand what library is used. For example, let's now try to accidentally import something that should not be performed. If I go to the UI library, and I try to import in the button component, for example, the error handler service. The Visual Studio Code will actually provide me that option to give the import, but the constraint that we set up in ESLint JSON will tell me that this is an error. A project tagged with scope share UI can only depend on the libs tagged with scope utils. By doing this, I'm aware that I should not import the error handler service in my UI component. And by doing so, we are actually restricting the accidental imports. Okay, now let's go to our application before the migration. This is actually our project that we are using in our company, which was in pretty good shape, I need to say, but it was before we moved to the NX. The first thing that we had is that we had Angular JSON file, which still wasn't splitted in a several project JSON file. And you can see how big it is. I mean, for the 7-8 libraries, this become really hard to maintain. And when you want to change something in your build process, this is, I would say, a bit hard to look and to find what you need. Another thing is that we had, for example, the ESLint file with all the things configured for our libraries and for our projects. But after a certain time, we accidentally end up with a different ESLint file for other libraries. They were pretty much similar, but there were some differences. And also from time to time, some projects start to become different with the code standards. We, of course, improved this with the NX.js by inheriting all the rules that I showed you earlier. And also, one of the important things, we weren't completely aware which library is used. I show you that with the accidental imports. I mean, it can happen to everyone. For example, for us, it was a problem when we imported the mock test from another library. When we start the migration, we actually ended up the one circular dependency. I will just show you now the error. So maybe if you start your migration, you will see the error. The error looks like this, and it is actually telling us that the ng-common share library is importing something that from the ng-common utils, but ng-common utils is also importing something from ng-common shared. And it was actually just a mock, so we didn't understand this. But when we start the migration, this is something that we actually saw when we're trying to provide a visual graph. And this is actually good. By doing this, you maybe have even more dependencies that you need to resolve and that you're not aware that they are used in some other projects. Also, by specifying the rule that I mentioned, that depends on, by specifying that rule, you're exactly aware of which library is dependent on another library. For example, this is useful when you're adding a new library, which consists another library, but you're not completely sure which consistent library is dependent on. By specifying this rule, you actually need to specify the order how your libraries are built. And this is also really, really helpful for us. So by doing this, you actually get familiar with your architecture because, again, imagine you're working with 20 developers. The NX really helps to optimize the development and to keep the coding standards that you set up on the beginning. Okay, this is pretty much it that I wanted to show you in this topic. As I said, it really depends from your project. It might look that your project is already in a good shape, but when you start the migration, some things will comes out as we saw from the circular dependencies or the things that you're not completely aware. And yeah, just you need to understand that those things are completely normal, and you might expect some things to run out of the box when you read the documentation. But when you start to go that, you will understand that some of the things are really, really dependent only for your project. Now I try to show you the most common cases and the most common errors that you might encounter, but also, again, you can expect some more changes when you start the migration. Thank you. Now, if you have some questions, I will be glad to respond.
Thank you, Boris. So If you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A session and Boris will address these.
Okay, we have first question. It comes from Stefan. He's asking, is there ideal project size or complexity where adopting NX Monorepo becomes very beneficial?
Okay, thanks for the question. So it's not about the size. I mentioned at the beginning that NX is more useful for the big projects, but that's not completely true. It is more for the projects that is planned to scale and to evolve. So it depends if your project actually contains another libraries that are reused in another applications or in other libraries, then it is definitely a good choice to use the NX, because by doing that, you're actually be completely aware where library is used and what you want to achieve with those libraries. I mean, yeah, mostly it is for the bigger size projects, but also for the smaller projects, you can, if it is well reused by the libraries, you can also use the NX, and by doing the imports the libraries, you can, with the NX, discover where those libraries are imported. So it's not completely about the size, but it's also how your libraries are used in the project.
Boris?
Okay. There is another one. Slavica was asking, what were the biggest challenges you encountered where migrating Angular CLI libraries to NX Monorepo, and how did you overcome them?
Well, as I said, the biggest challenges is when you write the script, you may expect that everything will just run out of the box. But some of the things you can actually find in documentation, such as, for example, adding the workspace rule or adding the depends on, it is really important to read the documentation well and to understand how you can achieve this. But for example, there are some things that you actually need to understand your project. So for example, we weren't aware we had a bit different structure for some of the folders. Our libraries are in the dist folder and then in the libs folder. And that's something that you need to configure for your CI/CD. So those paths are, for example, is just in your case, and you need to be completely aware how you structure the project. And those things are, you might not read on the documentation if that is something different that is from the NX documentation. So we had a bit different thing because our projects are shared across other repositories, but we managed to overcome them because we actually start to become even more familiar with our architecture on all our projects.
As addition to that, I would just say that NX is not built only for Angular. It is built for any TypeScript, JavaScript projects, and there is a lot of different configurations and plugins that you can use for different technologies. So I would say that it is also very important to understand Angular CLI and how Angular is building and compiling projects, and then move them to NX configuration. So I think that is also, you have to keep in mind, as I said, that it is not designed only for Angular. Okay, we have one more question. Angelica is asking if you are using forked libraries. They are not maintained anymore. Should you use NX?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, it's not, I think those things are not too related. I mean, you need first to think about the strategy, what you're going to do with the forked libraries. For example, why those libraries are forked. I mean, if those libraries stopped with the development, then you need to reconsider should you using those libraries or maybe they become forked or something like that. But also, for example, if those libraries won't be developed again, you maybe need to reconsider should you replace those libraries. And then I think you can start thinking about the NX. I think those things are not too related. You can always override them and keep them in a version that you want. They will be affected if you don't maintain them, because, for example, on those libraries you can have the Angular 14 and in your project can be Angular 16. But again, you need to think about those libraries even if you're not switching to the NX.
Okay. I saw someone raise the hand.
Yes, I think it was Angela. So
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see the Q&A section. I'll just write there, or I can ask a question. Sorry.
Okay.
doesn't
Okay,
matter.
no worries. There is one more question. It is related to how steep is learning curve when you are adopting NX, and what is your experience with that, your team and familiarity with the Angular CLI, how they accepted this, and what is the thing maybe that is most important in this learning journey?
Okay. I would say it's not too steep if you're coming from already a big Angular enterprise project, because Angular CLI already provides the workspace architecture that is, I would say, pretty much similar to the NX, but NX is coming with some additional tools, additional options that will improve your code. So it is really important, as I mentioned, to read the documentation well, because most of the things that you encounter when you switch to the next probably will be there in documentation. So that's like advice that you should definitely follow when you start to work with the NX. But again, if you're coming from the Angular world and workspace applications, I think the curve won't be too steep. But maybe if you're coming from the smaller React applications that are pretty much single page applications without the workspace architecture, it might be a bit hard for you to understand where libraries should be located and how they should be used. I mean, what should go in the UI library, how simple logic should be for those libraries to be reused, etc.
Okay. I will add something on top of this. After we migrated to NX, I think that experience for developers that are working in the Monorepo was more or less the same as a CLI. We created a dozen of commands that are helping us in package JSON file to build application, to a linked application, to do different things in app. And from that point of view, nothing has changed because we are already used mostly the commands from package JSON file to do those things. Also, there is a possibility to forward the requests for Angular CLI to or in different direction, to forward from NX to Angular CLI, to add a component, to add a library, to make different changes. And that's why there are plugins not only for Angular, but for React and some other technologies. So after the migration, I think that usage of Monorepo is in the same way as you are using regular repositories and you are developing the applications. Okay, there is another one. Looking back at the migration, what was the single most impactful improvement achieved by transitioning to NX Monorepo?
I would say definitely it is of awareness how our libraries is used or where they are included in the dependencies. By enforcing the module boundaries that we had a chance to see, you're completely aware where your application is actually consisted in another application. By doing that, you're actually achieving the performance. Your builds are definitely smaller, and also your code becomes cleaner. It becomes more consistent. So you definitely start to understand your architecture and your libraries, how they're used in each other.
Okay. There is a question why Nx instead of classic repo? In short, by your opinion. I would just jump in to answer this one because I want to add something on the top of your answer to the previous question. For me, the why Nx instead of classic repo, I would say that after we move to the Nx, now we have everything in one repo, and our CI and CD pipeline is much more flexible and faster and performant than it was before. We had libraries, and we had, I think, 4 different repositories for them. And they were dependent on each other. So we had to build, for example, and make a pull request into one repo. Then you have to wait until that first repo is built. Then you have to deploy the first package to the npm registry and so on. And then you go to the second library, pull the latest version of that dependent or of all dependencies, and then again build, approve, and so on and so on. So I think that we spent approximately 3 to 4 hours to push everything from those 4 repos to be visible on npm due the CI thing, because we are using a Sonar Cube and some other things that are doing a quality assurance on every build. And that takes time. So now when we are doing a build, we are able to do everything in one go, and it is much more faster, and it is more performant. On the other hand, we are from CI/CD perspective, it is very beneficial to have a pre-release. We made a specific continuous integration for the pre-releases when every developer can push a pre-release versions of libraries. So he does not have to copy something or go to the node modules, then copy the modules that he wants and so on. So right now it is one push to the repo. You wait for approximately 5 to 10 minutes, everything is built and it is ready on npm registry, and that's it. There is question from Angela. Is there an option to use a library in multiple Nx Monorepo projects? Or if we want same UI library, we basically copy paste. For example, custom UI library for, let's say, a table that is shared throughout all projects. Yeah, that is the question. I think the Monorepo is allowing you to have multiple libraries. So we already have multiple libraries inside the Monorepo. And we have only one app. That app in Monorepo is used for internal testing of one of the libraries that is really hard to unit test because it is related to drawing the map and canvas and some other stuff. And it is not doable to test every time by doing a pre-release. We wanted something that is faster. So for example, for that library, we have application that is in Monorepo that we can build and start with inside the Monorepo. So that is my answer to this question. Boris, do you have to add something on top of this?
No, that's pretty much it. I only want to ask if that library is actually another repository. Is that something that you mean, Angela?
I don't know if I can answer here, but yeah, I thought if you had like a UI library custom, let's say you don't use any CSS frameworks or anything, but you could just create a custom library for UI something, maybe a table, maybe a card, doesn't matter, but either that or you create a custom library for authentication if it pings the same server for multiple apps or something. And the other logic is not irrelevant here. Can you use the same library in a couple of Monorepo projects? Like let's say that UI library or that data access library for everything for multiple like 2 or 3 Nx Monorepo.
You can. There is nothing that is preventing you to have external dependencies in Monorepo. So yeah, we also have them. So for example, we are using a bootstrap across different libraries, or we are using a key cloak for authentication across different libraries, and that's fine. If we don't have multiple monorepos, because I think that beats the purpose of monorepo. But in the case you have multiple monorepos, you can connect them. But again, I think it is purpose to have everything in one monorepo and not spread around. There is I'm not sure if it is true or false, but there is a story that Google have just one repo for all of their products. I'm not sure that it is true, but I think it is very close to true. So also for the Facebook, they have one repo, and that's it. Whole Facebook and all products from Facebook are in one monorepo. So I think that in that moment, the CI/CD pipelines are becoming more hard to maintain, but from the development point of view, coding is just far more easier, and that's it. So
yeah, I agree. I would definitely recommend to combine those libraries in a single monorepo repository, because that's the actual purpose. But if you have that chance that you need to have several Nx monorepos, you probably should add all of those into the workspace rule, and then to provide a certain paths how you're going to install those external dependencies in your Nx monorepo. But again, it is better if you manage to move them all into one Nx monorepo and use them from there.
okay, there is one more question from Yelena. She's asking, are there any differences related to the versioning of the libraries, and it is used in several different projects? I think that monorepo is not related to the versioning. Basically, it is not preventing you to have multiple versions of code, multiple branches, and so on and so on. So from our experience, and this happened this morning, we have different two branches for different deployment phases that we will do. So there is a fix, for example, on the production, and we have a branch that is in monorepo, and it is just you are doing a bug fix, then you are pushing the code, you are incrementing the version, and so on. I think with the versioning, there is nothing specific for the monorepo. I think it is absolutely same as you are doing versioning everywhere else. The good thing with the monorepo and versioning is that you can force changes in or upgrades in different dependencies for all libraries to be in the same moment. For example, if you have external dependency, as we have like a key cloak, we can force a key cloak upgrade in one go and avoid different versions of a key cloak as dependency in different libraries. So I think, I don't know if we mentioned that, but I think that is also one of the key benefits, because you cannot have, you will do, or monorepo will do the best job to prevent different external dependencies to be in the different versions. So I think that is one of the benefits that we gain. Boris, do you have something to add on this one?
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that. We mentioned that on one of the slides, that actually external dependencies such as RxJS, or I don't know, the Bootstrap, or any other library that you're using will actually need to be on the same version for the other libraries. By doing that, you're actually keeping your versions in sync. I mean, it depends in how shape your application is. If you have several libraries that are on the different versions, it will be a bit hard to update that if there are many versions below, for example, than the main libraries. But again, the good thing about the NX, you will definitely need to resolve that before you start to adding new library or to completely migrate your applications.
Lazar is asking a very nice question. So Boris, he's asking, are circular dependencies rare? If not, how can we effectively resolve them? Also, when it comes to constraints, is it wise to enforce them strictly?
I would say this depends. Circular dependencies depends from several things. They depends how big of your team is, because if there is I don't know, 15 developers and you're changing developers a lot, you might end up with dependencies that you're not completely aware. Also, it depends from the size of your project. If your project is big and you're using a lot of libraries, then you also maybe encounter from time to time the circular dependencies. And you can see they can completely come by accident, as we do. We imported just the mock in our tests for another library. But the good thing is how you can encounter them. You can actually see in this graph where those imports is used. So first you can see the error. Where I put it? You can see the error, which is telling you actually which library has a circular dependency. And then when you see this error, you can actually see in this graph, if you manage to run it, where those library are actually used. So just by reading the errors, you can actually see, is this something that might happen by accident, or this is something that actually happened to the, I don't know, wrong architecture. And then you need to reconsider, is this something that how your architecture should look.
I would add something to this one. First, I think that you need to enforce these restrictions through strict rules, because if you are making a circular dependencies between the files or between the libraries, you are making something wrong. I think, as Boris said, depending on the team size and how often you have transfer knowledge to different team members, you need this. If the knowledge of libraries are same across the whole team and all of them know what they need and from which point some things are coming, then this enforcement is not a problem. We encounter in this whole translation one place where we made a circular dependency, and this skipped through the pull requests. And that's why I think that making rules is better way than just watching for this on the merge request and going over the imports and saying you cannot import this because this will create a circular dependency. System is working for you, so I think that Monorepo is providing that as one of the features, and I think it is really, really nice to have that.
Yeah, the good thing is that we set up the constraints with the enforced module boundaries. We didn't have any circular dependency after that, and we did that in a while. So this actually comes before we migrate to an NX. So this actually shows the purpose of the NX.
Okay, this is all. There are no new questions. I think that we covered up all of the questions that were in queue.
Okay, so
Anything
we can
else?
wrap it up if there are no more questions. Okay, so thank you once again for joining us today. If there are any further comments or questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact me directly or write to our office email. The recording of the webinar will also be made available once we've edited this, and we will send an email notification about this. So, and also the presentation materials. We truly appreciate your time, and thanks for taking part in the discussion. We think it was really nice and productive, and we hope to see you again on some of our upcoming webinars.
Thank you
Thank you,
for
Boris, and
Thank you.
thank you, Lada.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.